when there's an attack on Israel, etc., it really is an attack on the Judeo-Christian way of life. Hey friends, Bishop Robert Stearns here with this week's Israel Frontlines Update. This is your weekly time where you and I get together and just kind of zero in on the pulse of what is happening in Israel, the greater Middle East, and what is happening in terms of anti-Semitism, and keeping our eye carefully, prayerfully, biblically on what is happening in all of these arenas, because we understand that Israel and the Jewish people are always the canary in the mine shaft. If you're not familiar with that phrase, whenever there's going to be an earthquake or a crumbling in a mine shaft, the canaries would fly out first. In other words, it's a first sign. And you can trace throughout history that when there's a rise of anti-Semitism, of Jew hatred, when there's an attack on Israel, etc., it really is an attack on Western civilization, on the Judeo-Christian way of life. And we are called as Christians, if you're a Christian watching this, we are called, especially because of the fact that Romans tells us that the Jewish people are the root of our faith, we are called to stand in a special way in prayer and prophetic attention. So let's get into this week's update. If you're new, hit the subscribe button, the share button, the like button, hit all the buttons and join us in this ongoing weekly biblical journey to carefully discerning the questions that are happening in this generation. Now, in a moment, I'm going to go to President-elect Trump's speech that is sending shockwaves across the Middle East. He came out and said very, very clearly, if the hostages are not released by Inauguration Day, he said all hell will break loose in Gaza. And so we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But I want to begin with this unbelievable statistic. The Foundation to Combat Anti-Semitism reported that between 2022 and 2024, so just in 2 years, online anti-Semitic posts rose from 171 million to 1.1 billion. Mind-blowing. This is a tenfold increase online in hate speech that is just happening out there in the public square. You know, I just did a video related to the Holocaust, related to Nazi Germany. And I think the thing that is just terrifying right now is that in this new world, right, where our telephones make everything global, at least in Nazi Germany, anti-Semitism was mostly, I'm not going to say entirely, but was mostly encased in that geographic region. Of course, they were in partnership with radical Muslims. We know Hitler visited with Muslim leaders, etc. But in this day and age, this virus, this deadly virus of anti-Semitism, which if you're a Christian, you're saying, what does that have to do with me? Folks, first of all, what it has to do with you is we're called to speak out for righteousness. We're called to speak out for justice. We're called, in the words of Martin Luther King Jr., injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So number one, there's that. But number two, the same enemies of the Jewish people are the enemies who are threatening, and indeed in Africa and Asia, murdering Christians. And so we have to understand this is a fight against the Saturday people, the Jews, and the Sunday people, the Christians. So an unbelievable statistic, this rise in online anti-Semitism. How does that manifest? Tragically, on January 6th, just a few days ago, 2 terrorists opened fire in Judea and Samaria and gunned down 3 innocent Israelis. Rachel Cohen and Eliza Raiz. Rachel was 73, Eliza was 70. They were sisters-in-law. They were both school teachers. They were driving home, and the gunman confronted them, shot them dead. On the same day, a 35-year-old off-duty policeman, Elad Winkelstein, was taking his son to school, driving his son to school. As he's driving his son to school, a terrorist, a radical Islamic terrorist, a Jew hater, opens fire. His young son ducks down, avoids being killed, and uses his dying father's cell phone to call for help. These are the tragedies that the Jewish people are living with every day. 2 sister-in-laws, teachers driving to school, murdered. A young 9 or 10-year-old boy having to use his dying father's cell phone as his father dies in front of his eyes. This is the tragedy when anti-Semitism continues to go forth unchallenged. Well, I want to tell you something. President-elect Trump is not going to leave it unchallenged.
If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East. And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone.
You know, all I hear is ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire. Release the hostages. Release the hostages and stop murdering and bombing and sending rockets, and there'll be peace. I've been 32 years in the land of Israel. I have had conversations with countless thousands of Israelis. And what I've heard over and over and over and over again is this: we just want to live in peace with our Arab neighbors. This is not what you hear from the anti-Zionist crowd. This is not what you hear from the river to the sea crowd. They are calling for the destruction of the Jewish state. They are calling for the elimination of the Jewish people. They do it in very subtle ways. They do it in very whitewashed ways, in very politically correct ways. But there is no call for peaceful coexistence. There is no call for let's find a way for humanity to work together and make this happen. There's only call for intifada. And we saw that this week in New York City on January 6th. Pro-Palestinian protesters gathered outside New York University's Tisch Hospital. The Tisch family, a well-known Jewish philanthropic family in New York, funded this hospital to do good in the city, gave huge donations to help the city, and hundreds of protesters surround this hospital, chanting out, "Say it loud, say it clear, we don't want no Zionists here." Protesters carried signs stating, "Abolish Israel." This is the kind of hate speech that is going on in front of our eyes. Intercessors, prayer warriors, pastors, I am asking you, you've got to get loud. You've got to go on social media. You've got to get in your pulpits. You've got to go to your school boards. You have to raise your voice, because I'm telling you, the other side is raising their voice loud and clear. Speaking of hospitals, the next day on January the 7th, the IDF released footage of an interrogation of a Hamas operative who was arrested at the hospital in Gaza. These hospitals in Gaza have been in the news. This is the Kamal Adwan Hospital in Gaza. Anas Mohammed Faiz al-Sharif, he was the terrorist, high-level terrorist who was arrested and interrogated, and he said that Hamas and Islamic Jihad used the medical center as a shelter because they knew that Israel could not effectively attack it. He testified Hamas and Islamic Jihad believed that the army could not bomb this location, like with an F-16 missile, or destroy it. And he confirmed that Hamas used the hospital as a weapons transfer location because they knew that they could get away with it. That is what we're dealing with in Gaza. Are there good doctors there that are trying to save lives? Of course there are. Are there innocent people who are going to die because of... Folks, if you go back in the archives, I went on, I think it was 2 weeks after this war started, and I said thousands and thousands and thousands of people will die. Why? Not because Israel is dedicated to destruction or hatred, but because radical Islamic theology is in love with death. It is a death cult, and they do not care how many innocent lives are killed in their maniacal goal to establish a caliphate, to establish the global domination of Islam. And folks, we are dealing with that in America. The UK, I've got friends, some of you might be watching from the UK. I don't know what's going to happen in the UK. You're reaching a tipping point that there will be no coming back from. Much of Europe is in this scary, scary place. These are the issues that surround Israel on a daily basis. And this is why you have to get educated and active on this issue. Finally, today, some good news. We have seen since the election, already in this moment, we've seen a shift in Congress. There's been bipartisan support in Congress. Congress restored funding to safeguard American Jewish communities. It's also working on the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act in the new session. And now they are calling on airlines to restore flights to Israel. This is obvious, folks. El Al is flying to Israel every single day. Every single day, El Al is flying to Israel. Representative Richie Torres, who's a personal friend of mine, a great champion of the Jewish people, he described the airline's position as essentially a boycott. Because now, people are trying to get back and forth, and there's literally one airline flying. And so thankfully, Congress is taking up a lot of these issues. President Biden says his administration is preparing another arms package to help Israel in this war. And President-elect Donald Trump's administration is planning to expand its successful Abraham Accords initiative and plans to penalize universities for failing to protect Jewish students. I told you this before, I'm telling you again, keep your eyes on Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is turning towards modernity, turning ever so slowly towards acknowledgement of the state of Israel. If and when this happens, it will be a sea change in the Middle East. It will be a new Middle East. So be praying, be educating yourself, be educating others. This is the defining issue of our generation. This little tiny nation, this tiny group of people, this is the hinge that history turns on. And if you're concerned about the future of your children and your grandchildren, you will get involved today in prayer and action and in giving. Join me, join Eagles Wings. Go to our website, eagleswings.org/donate. Become a partner. I cannot do this alone. This does cost money, believe it or not, and we need your involvement. We want to increase our outreach to Israel on a daily basis. Join us as a partner. Be on the right side of history. We'll see you next week for the Israel Frontlines Update.